What's up, gang? We're going to continue reading the Wetiko book. So we read to you the foreword. We did not read the introduction. We're going to continue with that. Chapter 1. And it should be a good time. This is, again, the book that I picked up at Black and Nobel, which we love to call in this city Black and Noble, even though it's Black and Nobel. So we heard the foreword by Larry Dossie, MD, and his biography that they included in the intro, which was very interesting. I think it was a pretty good intro for him and his work. Enough that it might be good to look into him and see what he does. It's pretty fascinating, his description and what work he's done. So, blah, blah, blah. Let us continue. The introduction, Wetiko in a nutshell. A contagious psychospiritual disease of the soul, a parasite of the mind, is currently being acted out en masse on the world stage by an insidious collective psychosis of titanic proportions. In this portion of the book now, we've moved past Dr. Dossie and we're listening to Paul Levy. Let me adjust my headphones. When this is republished, I'll put timestamps to when we start. Hope you're all well. And if you caught the Dr. B Serious radio show live stream that he did earlier, that was very good. Hope you enjoyed that as well. A contagious psychospiritual disease of the soul, a parasite of the mind, is currently being acted out en masse on the world stage by an insidious collective psychosis of titanic proportions. This mind virus, like Native Americans have called Wetiko, covertly operates through the unconscious blind spots in the human psyche, rendering people oblivious to their own madness and compelling them to act against their own best interests. Wetiko is a psychosis in the true sense of the word, a sickness of the spirit. An inner cancer of the soul, Wetiko covertly influences our perceptions so as to act itself out through us, while simultaneously hiding itself from being seen. Wetiko bewitches our consciousness. Wetiko bewitches our consciousness so that we become blind to the underlying assumption. I'm listening to some crazy music here. Let me turn this off. I had a hymn playlist on, and then I started playing Tokyo Hotel. We're not listening to Tokyo Hotel. All right. Pure book time. We're not listening to Tokyo Hotel tonight, guys. We're not doing that. It's not 2009, 2011. Wetiko bewitches our consciousness so that we become blind to the underlying assumed viewpoint through which we perceive, conjure up, and give meaning to our existence of both the world and ourselves. This psychic virus can be the thought of us as the bug in the system that informs and animates the madness that is playing out in our lives, both individually and collectively on the world stage. Wetiko, to quote author and environmental activist Derek Jensen, is spread till it now covers the earth and to a greater or lesser degree infects us all. There are no hospitals for this sickness. If we cannot acknowledge it, how can we attempt to cure it? Before being able to treat this sickness that has infected us all, we have to snap out of our denial, see the disease, acknowledge it, name it, and try to understand how it operates as to ascertain how to deal with it. That is what this book is all about. This is the intro again on the Wetiko book by Paul Levy. Welcome to the chat. Cited by many different names throughout history, the spirit of Wetiko renders every other issue secondary. Wetiko is the overarching umbrella that contains Okay, so in the foreword, he talks about Dr. Dossi talks about how this is an infection of the collective subconscious and the collective unconscious, if you believe in those things. He likens them to a lot of the aspects of Jungian psychology that are being used right now to try to help treat the issues that misogyny um, cause men, and then, laterally society at large as it interacts with men. There's probably like a 7 hour video so far. It's a little over 5 hours, but I projected the 7 hours. A master post I'm doing about misogyny. So I hope that helps anyone that may be beginning to encounter it or never has. I didn't encounter it until college, and it makes things terrible. So I'd like to see that not exist. Back to the book. Wetiko is the overarching umbrella that contains, subsumes, informs, and underlies every form of destruction of ourselves and others that our species is acting out in our world on every scale. If we don't come to terms with what Wetiko is revealing to us, nothing else will matter, as there will be no more human species. Humanity is facing the most important question in our history, whether human life will survive in anything that resembles that we know it to be. We are answering this question, which govern governmental policies and collective behavior that, for the most part, only increase our acceleration toward multiple disasters as we madly compete with each other to race off the nearest cliff as quickly as possible. We have fallen blind, as if in a hypnotic trance, while a seemingly divine force compels our species towards its own self destruction. To quote eminent theologian David Rake Griffin, our battle seems to be against flesh and blood, less than against some demonic power to which human civilization is in bondage. Wetiko, the book, follows on my earlier work on the same topic, Dispelling Wetiko. In this new book, I am attempting to elucidate how Wetiko has been creatively represented and symbolized not only in various spiritual wisdom traditions from time immemorial, but by creative artists and philosophers throughout the ages as well. In addition, I am contemplating the current ongoings in our world gone mad through a lens that hopefully will help the reader see and get a better handle on Wetiko. In essence, I'm attempting to translate deep primordial indigenous wisdom into a modern day psychological idiom that can be more easily understood and taken online in our present state of awareness. We are truly at the beginning stages of understanding this elusive and heretofore invisible virus of the mind. My books on Wetiko are in the service of helping us to open our eyes and see this deadly virus of the mind before it's too late. My personal experience of Wetiko. This is page 3 of Wetiko, and it's titled Wetiko in a Nutshell for this introduction portion. When I first directly encountered Wetiko, the experience literally drove me out of my mind. Some people think I haven't yet returned, but that's another story, and destroyed my entire family. I have written a book about this, Awakened by Darkness When Evil Becomes Your Father. One of the gifts of this nightmarish experience is that it has given me an authority to write about such heavy matters as Wetiko, and evil in a way that no amount of intellectual study could have provided. Though this traumatic set of experiences, I received a direct transmission or transfusion of what the Wetiko virus. What? Through this traumatic set of experiences, I received a direct transmission and transfusion of the Wetiko virus into the veins of my soul, which, besides making me sick and almost driving me permanently crazy, changed the trajectory of my entire life. This destined me to commit to healing myself from this ill-fated happenstance and to try to understand this seemingly otherworldly force with which I had come into contact or which had contacted me. Spooky. Okay. Fortunately, my close encounters of the Wetiko kind have helped me find my voice and discover my work. This book being just one example. If I hadn't connected with my creative nature, I would have been in deep trouble and undoubtedly would have become another one of Wetiko's seemingly endless casualties. The point is that I have not written this book as an intellectual, academic, or scholar comfortably sitting in an ivory tower, philosophizing or creating theories about Wetiko. Rather, I've written it in a way of coming to terms with my own harrowing experience with the same subject matter, barely escaping with my life and sanity intact. Let me make sure this is public because it's asking me to add folks to the chat, which I don't plan to do. All right, gang. We return to our book. My personal encounters with Wetiko have left me in a weird position. I felt convinced of the profound importance of something that many people seem either unaware of, disinterested in, judgmental of, or possessed by. Um, Me personally, I was completely disinterested in it until I kept getting all the Dr. B videos about it, so I figured maybe I should look into it. And then by happenstance, this was at Black and Nobel, so I grabbed it. Bought that, John. All right. It can be a very lonely experience to see something that many people aren't seeing. However, I've learned to perceive in my vision and continually refine my ability to transmit what I'm seeing in a way that can be helpful to others. Wetiko. I've noticed that it is typically people who have been. I've noticed has been so tired, you guys. I'm sorry. I've noticed that it is typically people who have really suffered from it, from going through some sort of wounding experience, emotional trauma, abuse, addiction, and so on, and then have done their inner work, borrow that phrase from all the self help, who recognize what I'm talking about and what I point to the insidious workings of Wetiko. These are usually people who have found that traditional religions no longer satisfy their deeper spiritual needs and that mainstream cultural values no longer speak to their souls. Not contained in a faith, these people who don't feel that they are in possession of some absolute truth, but are really open to what resonates with their immediate lived experiences. Subchapter heading: The Normalization of Wetiko. A few years ago, I ran into a friend whom I hadn't seen for a while. He asked me what I've been up to. I answered that I was writing about the collective psychosis. Wetiko is a collective psychosis that our species have fallen into. His response was telling. He asked me what made me think there was a collective psychosis going on. His question left me speechless. I literally didn't know how to respond. What made him think there wasn't a collective psychosis going on, I wondered. Could he give me one piece of evidence? Our collective madness had been so normalized that most people, my friend was extremely bright, by the way, didn't even notice. Many crazy things, such as running around naked and screaming, for instance. This ingrained idea, however, gets in the way of recognizing the very, very real collective insanity in which all of us are, both passively and actively participating. If we want to envision what a collective psychosis could actually look like, it might be a real eye opener to realize it will look exactly like what is happening right now in our world. Whereas the voice of psychiatric establishment is pointing out that our species has fallen prey to a psychic epidemic of massive proportions. In a personal conversation I had with the late Harvard psychologist John Mack about exactly this point, he was of the opinion that the psychiatric community doesn't see it as their job to deal with collective psychosis, such as we are in today. Such collective psychopathologies are simply not on their radar. They focus and specialize exclusively on psychopathologies of the seemingly separate, discrete individual human being. Another thing that you should remember from the forward is that this book operates from these authors um, operate from the framework that there is no such thing as an individual. By not recognizing this worldwide systemic psychological disease that has infected the global body politic and hence in informing the pathologies of individuals, the mental health community continues its unwitting agent, helping the disease to propagate. Whose job is it to shed light on our species-wide illness, I wonder? Cultural anthropologists, sociologists, theologians, maybe by default the responsibility falls on each one of us. The mental health practitioner's blindness to the psychological disease provides important information about the nature of the beast we're dealing with. The disease has subsumed the very agency that should be monitoring and trying to heal it, transforming it into becoming one of its purveyors. Unless we are consciously aware of its covert operations, the disease will usurp our every attempt at healing it so as to further feed its pathology. Since the publishing of Dispelling Wetiko, I've received many emails that have suggested that the ever increasing madness that has played out over the world has proven my previous writings on Wetiko to be prescient, as if, like some sort of prophet, I had predicted the future. I don't feel this way. Far from my point of view, all I was doing is bringing Wetiko to light, was to point out that the deeper process has been informing events in the collective body politic of our world from time immemorial. It is noteworthy that, ultimately speaking, no such separate individual self exists. The self is relational, and that the way we only exist relative to others, to the environment, and to the universe at large. This is a fundamental disagreement that I have and I don't agree with. Um, so I'll be taking this book with a grain of salt, but I'm sure there will be some application I can find in this book. Instead of telling the future, I'm trying to shed light on a dynamic happening within the human psyche that has been rendered unconscious and hence forgotten. A dynamic that will shape the present moment and will produce our future. We won't be able to effectively deal with the horrors that lie in front of us if we can't face the horrors that lie both behind us and within us. This deeper dynamic has been happening in and through the whole course of human history for millennia, but in recent times is becoming more evident and harder to deny. I was and still am simply pointing at a deeper, long time pattern that is revealing itself through the behavior of our species. Once we recognize this Wetiko inspired pattern, we cannot unsee it. Our aptitude for vision expands accordingly. The contributions of C.G. Jung, being ahead of, as well as outside of, and an expression of his time, the great doctor of the soul, C.G. Jung, who, it should be noted, considered himself a philosopher in disguise, was tracking Wetiko, although not using the indigenous name. He referred to it by a number of different names, for example, oftentimes referring to the danger of psychic epidemics, collective psychosis, and germ infection of evil, totalitarian psychosis, imperialistic madness, counterfeiting spirits, powers of darkness, the demon of sickness, etc. Jung's wisdom and insight on this topic deeply informs this book. Finding Jung's work was instrumental for me to get a handle on my own personal encounter with the mind-numbing evil of Wetiko. I shudder to think where I would be if I hadn't come across his writings. It can be so helpful when we are experiencing something that is not culturally sanctioned or recognized to discover someone who has found the words for our seemingly unspeakable experience. Other people have described me, to my honor, as a Jungian. In this I think of Jung saying, "Thank God I am Jung and not a Jungian." I have never even taken a course on Jung. I am simply an independent researcher who follows what inspires me, which Jung does no end. I am totally self-taught regarding Jung. Indeed, he himself felt that his work would speak to more ordinary people than to scholars and experts. I am a case in point. I am only interested in the parts of his work that speak to my personal experience and help me alleviate my suffering. It is my hope that, at the very least, this book will give the reader a deeper appreciation of the genius of Jung and the value of his work for our times, which is immense. I can only imagine what Jung would say if he were alive today. In these pages, I feel like I am doing continual active imagination, which him, both in this book and within my own mind, agree. Subheading: A Native American Idea. The way I have interpreted the concept of Wetiko is my own, insofar as I have taken a First Nations idea and developed it in and for a Western mind and cultural context. I feel that I am merely a translator trying to create a bridge so that their profound insight might benefit the neurotic Western psyche. I've never lived in the environments in which Native Americans, excuse me, I've never lived in the environments in which the Native American conception of Wetiko arose. Pre-Columbian woodlands and plains, wild waters full of creatures in their spirit forms, vast herds of game galloping across wind-blown grasses. I'm a child of cities, machines, and Western civilization. As such, I experienced Wetiko in a typical dysfunctional American family and a practically insane Western capitalist society. I thus bring new paradigm, Western symbolic logic, and intellectual formulations to a construct from another culture. I do so with humility, respect, and the recognition that from one point of view, I could be seen to be appropriating a concept without knowing its original existential basis and phenomenology. From my perspective, I am writing about the indigenous idea of Wetiko to honor the great native traditions of wisdom. In a sense, my work on Wetiko is a collaboration between me and the unknown Native American philosophers, psychologists, and shamans. They lived in a world of tight communities and mutual responsibility for daily survival in harmony with nature. They had no cars or mass weaponry or stock markets or telecommunications, but they were human like us. They too had to deal with the ins and outs of human psyche. They fought wars and dealt with psychosis, crime, evil, and people of the lie. They had to protect themselves and their societies. When dark forces arose within the group, they had to identify them and know what could be handled and transmuted by the tribe and what was so toxic that it needed to be exiled for the safety of the rest. Their shamans and medicine women and men understood the nature of demons, possession, and evil in a way that could be most instructive for modern humanity. They provide us with a brilliant diagnosis as well as an urgent warning. The followers of the Buddhist path can't monopolize or copyright the idea of Buddha nature, for they are pointing at something that is intrinsic to the living experience of being a human being. In the same way that Native American wisdom holders are illuminating in their conception of Wetiko a universal archetypal experience that is an essential aspect of our experience of being human. The Native American conception of Wetiko can add to completement and flesh out the articulation of this same malady by other spiritual traditions. In describing Wetiko, the creed described giants that grow with each human meal, so they are simultaneously huge and emaciated, never able to feel their inner void, searching desperately for their next victim, driven by excess. In coming across the Native American idea and description of Wetiko, I recognize it in my own life, as well as within my own mind. I have no doubt whatsoever that the Native Americans refer to what the Native Americans refer to as vertigo is a universal condition afflicting everyone. It is something we are so all fated to come to terms with in our lives. Page 9, we're still in the introduction. Wetiko in a nutshell. What is Wetiko really? Wetiko is a cannibalizing force driven by insatiable greed, appetite without satisfaction, consumption as an end in itself, and war for its own sake against other tribes, species, and nature, and even against the individual's own humanity. It is a disease of the soul, and being a disease of the soul, we all potentially have Wetiko, as it pervades and informs the underlying field of consciousness. Any one of us at any moment can fall into our unconscious and unwittingly become an instrument for the evil of Wetiko to act itself out through us and incarnate in our world. If we see someone who seems to be taken over by Wetiko and we think they have the disease and we don't, and seeing them as separate, we have fallen under the spell of the virus ourselves. Wetiko Wetiko induces in us a proclivity to see the source of our own pathology outside of ourselves, existing in the other. Wetiko feeds off polarization and fear and terror of the other. Seeing the world through a Wetiko-inspired lens of separation or otherness enlivens what Jung calls the god of terror who dwells in the human soul, and simultaneously plays itself out within ourselves, our soul, and in the world at large. Wetiko subversively turns our genius for reality creation against us in such a way that we become bewitched by the projective tendencies of our own mind. Falling under Wetiko's spell, we become entranced by our own intrinsic gifts and talents for dreaming up our world in a way that not only doesn't serve us, but rather it puts at the service of Wetiko, whose agent is contrary to our own. Our creativity then boomerangs against us, such that we hypnotize ourselves within our own creative genius, which cripples our evolutionary potential. To the extent we are unconsciously possessed by the spirit of Wetiko, it is as if a psychic tapeworm or parasite has taken over our brain and tricked us, its hosts, into thinking we are feeding and empowering ourselves. We are actually nourishing the parasite. A process in which we ultimately kill its host, us. In Wetiko disease, something that is not us surreptitiously, hello? In Wetiko disease, something that is not us surreptitiously, beneath our conscious awareness, takes the place of and plays the role of who we actually are, shape-shifting so as to cloak itself in our form. This mercurial predator gets under our skin and puts us on as a disguise. Miming ourselves, we become a copy, a false duplicate of our true selves. We are then truly playing out a real version of the imposter syndrome. Let's see, the introduction continues for how many pages? 8 more pages. There's a song called The Beast in Me by Nick Lowe that I translated to Louisiana French. I never posted the song here, but I will. It's relevant to this last paragraph we read. Pardon. The sickness of exploitation. Wetiko is powerless to control our true nature, but it can control and manipulate this false identity that is set up within us. When we fall under the sway of Wetiko's illusion, we simultaneously identify with who we are not, while disassociating and forgetting who we actually are, giving away our power, not to mention ourselves in its process. To quote radical psychiatrist R.D. Laing, we have been conned into the illusion that we are separate, skin-encapsulated egos, having at one and the same time lost ourselves and developed the illusion that we are autonomous egos. We are expected to comply by inner consent with external constraints to an almost unbelievable extent. Disconnecting from our own intrinsic agency, we open ourselves to be used, manipulated, and exploited by outside forces. Indigenous author Jack Forbes, who wrote the classic book about Wetiko entitled Columbus and Other Cannibals. So the book is called Columbus and Other Cannibals by Jack Forbes, refers to Wetiko as the sickness of exploitation. Wetiko can be conceived of as being an evil, cannibalistic vampire spirit that inspires people under its sway to take and consume another's resources and life force energy solely for their own profit without giving anything of value back from their own lives. Wetiko thus violates the sacred law of reciprocity in both human affairs and the natural world as a whole. Wetiko, like any virus, is fundamentally dead. It's fundamentally dead matter, and like a vampire, it has a thirst for the very thing it lacks, the essence of our soul, our very life force. A member of the undead vampiric Wetiko virus takes on and mimics life itself. It is only in and through a living being that it acquires a pseudo-life. The person so taken over becomes an outpost for Wetiko to do its dirty work. The raison d'etre for viruses like Wetiko is that it continually reproduces itself. The Wetiko virus isn't able to replicate itself through its own energy. However, it is so compelled to use us to propagate itself that we can pass on and transmit the bug to others. The main channel of Wetiko's transmission is relational. So I'm gonna make a comment. Y'all think y'all so connected. Y'all got Wetiko because y'all don't think y'all individuals. The fuck? Alright, that's my comment. We continue. The Wetiko virus isn't able to replicate itself through its own energy. However, it is compelled to use us to propagate itself so we can pass on and transmit the bug to others. The main channel of Wetiko's transmission is relational. It exists through our relationships with others, each other, and the world at large. Like a vampire that can't stand the light of day, the Wetiko virus can't stand to be illuminated. However, in seeing how it covertly operates through our own consciousness, we take away its seeming independence, autonomy, and power over us, while at the same time empowering ourselves. The way the vampiric Wetiko covertly operates within a human psyche is mirrored in the way it works in the outside world, speaking about the genocide and colonization that the Europeans perpetuated on the Native Americans. Indigenous author and therapist Eduardo Duran writes in Healing the Soul Wound by Eduardo Duran. The colonial process experienced by these people, the native people, can be described as a collective raping process of the psyche, soul of both land and the people. In essence, the vampire bit the life world known as Turtle Island, as the Western Hemisphere is known in native cosmology, and the infection of the poison injected by the vampire has not been eradicated. Young never tried. Uh, Jung never tired of warning us that the greatest danger threatening humanity today is the possibility that millions, even billions of us, can fall into our unconscious together in a collective psychosis, reinforcing each other's madness in such a way that we become unwittingly complicit in creating our own destruction. When this occurs, humanity finds itself in a situation where we are confronted with and battered by the primordial, elemental forces of our own psyche. Subheading: The Internal Origins of Wetiko. The most depraved part of falling under the thrall of Wetiko is that, ultimately speaking, it involves the assent of our own free will. No other, no one other than ourselves is ultimately responsible for our situation. There is no objective entity called Wetiko that exists outside of ourselves that can steal our soul. The dreamed up phenomenon of Wetiko tricks us into giving it away ourselves. People under the sway of Wetiko are implicated in and willingly subscribe to their own enslavement. They do this to the point that when offered the way out of comfort of their prison, they oftentimes react violently. They symbolically and sometimes literally try to kill the messenger who is showing them the path to freedom. Ultimately speaking, in Wetiko disease, we are not ourselves being infected by by a physical, objectively existing virus outside of ourselves. Rather, the origin and genesis of the Wetiko psychosis endogenous. Its roots are to be found within the human psyche. The fact that Wetiko is the expression of something inside of us means that the cure for Wetiko is likewise within us. Though not objectively existing, the Wetiko pathogen has a virtual reality that nevertheless can influence us in such a way that it is potentially destroying our species. The fact that something only exists as a function of ourselves can destroy us is pointing at introducing us to the incredibly vast, invisible, and yet mostly untapped creative power that is our inherent birthright. If not used consciously, however, this creative power turns destructive. Wetiko can likewise be likened to the darkness, which is, in this example, the ignorance that is characteristic of Wetiko, in a room where there is no sunlight. As long as there is no light, this darkness can seem like a real thing, and yet once we open the blinds and sunlight, symbolic of awakening, pours into the room, the darkness is in the same moment evicted and no longer exists, as if it has never existed in the first place. After the light has emerged, we can contemplate the darkness from the point of view of it being nothing other than the absence of light. I don't like this analogy, but for many reasons, but it's fine. If you don't have the same reasons, you would already be upset about the analogy if you knew what I was thinking about. So anyway, and yet before the coming of the light, the darkness had real effects, meeting every criteria for being real in and of itself. I think of Jung's idea that in the realm of psyche, something is real if it works, rather as if it has real effects. This is the paradox. As compared to existing by virtue of some quality, Wetiko only exists by the lack of virtue of not realizing our own nature. Wetiko is non-local in that it has an inner disease of the soul that discloses itself through the canvas of the outer world. This mind virus has a seemingly magical ability to extend itself out into the world and to configure outer events to give itself living material form, not constrained by the conventional laws of third dimensional space and time. Wetiko non locally informs events in the world as well as our reactions to them, so as to synchronistically express and reveal itself. Just like in the dream, events in the outer world are symbolically reflecting back to us a condition within the psyche of each one of us. Recognizing this correlation brings us to begin to develop the vision to see Wetiko. If we don't understand that our current world, what? If we don't understand that our current world crisis has its roots within and is an expression of the human psyche, we are doomed to unconsciously repeat and continually recreate endless suffering and destruction in increasingly amplified forms as if we are having a recurring nightmare. In my language, the inner situation within ourselves is getting dreamed up into materialized form through and as the world. In waking life, we are continually dreaming right beneath the threshold of consciousness, especially when we are under the influence of our unconscious complexes. In other words, when we are under the influence of our activated unconscious, we will unknowingly recreate our very inner landscape by the medium of the outside world. What can be more dreamlike than that? Hit the follow button so you can comment in the chat during the live. What is happening in the world today is reflecting and both literally and symbolically revealing to us something unknown within our own psyche. At the same time, in a non-linear, a causal feedback loop that happens both atemporally outside of time and over linear time. Events in our world are informed and shaped by the very inner psychological process they are reflecting. The inner and outer are simultaneously co-arising and reciprocally co-evoking each other. This is to say that what is happening within us and what is arising in our world have a mysterious interconnection. The inner and the outer are ultimately not separate nor separable. Recognizing the correlation between the inner and outer, between the micro and macro, is the doorway to being able to see Wetiko and wake up to the dreamlike nature that Wetiko is simultaneously hiding and revealing depending on our point of view and level of awareness. When we realize that we are microcosms, mirrors, the macrocosm, the universe at large, this reveals to us that there is a pathway inside of us that leads not to our particular psychological idiosyncrasies, but as to what is important. Recognizing the connection between what is happening in our world with what is taking place within our minds become a channel to our secret doorway that leads beyond our merely personal psychological issues, empowers us to deal with the essential problems of our time. Subheading: Dreaming with Tico. And I'll pause here to check my phone as I felt it buzz several times. And there's things I didn't need to read. Stupid text messages. Okay, dreaming Wetiko. The Wetiko psychosis is a dreamed up phenomenon, which is to say that we are potentially participating in and actively co creating the Wetiko epidemic in each and every moment. Like a collective dream, the Wetiko epidemic is the manifestation of something in our shared collective unconscious taking on material form. Wetiko, okay, so here's another comment. I don't believe in a collective unconscious. You're very aware of whatever you're doing, and you choose to participate because somebody that was an authority figure told you to participate in it, and because they participate in it. I wouldn't call that a collective unconscious. It is a social script. Anyway, Batiko is literally demanding that we pay attention to the fundamental role that the psyche, the source of our dreams, plays in creating our experience of ourselves and of the world. Forgetting the crucial role that the psyche plays in creating our experience, we marginalize our own intrinsic authority. And he spelled it author-itty. Um, Tragically dreaming up both internal and external authoritarian forces to limit our freedom and mold our experience for us. Never before in all of human history has our hello? Never before in all of human history has our species been forced to confront the numinous, world transferring powers of the psyche on so vast a scale. Even with the ongoing multiple catastrophes that are converging in our world, it is not beyond the bounds of possibility that the darkness that is emerging today might become the soil of which a regenerative age and nobler culture arise. Although the source of humanity's inhumanity to itself, Wetiko, is at the same time a potential catalyst for our evolution as a species, recognizing the dreaming up nature of Wetiko and the Wetiko epidemic can become the impetus for us to awaken to the dreamlike nature of the universe itself. We are Wetiko's offspring, and that this particular disease helps to grow a new part of us, potentially raising us to a higher level of our evolution, if it doesn't kill us in the process. Instead of the perspective of linear causality, where one thing causes another, to wrap our mind around the nature of the situation with which we are dealing necessitates we implement bidirectional thinking, though simultaneously in two directions. In a circular process without beginning or end, we are being dreamed up by the universe while dreaming up the universe at one and the same time. To see this not only demands that we have an expansion of consciousness, it is the very expansion itself. The less Wetiko is recognized, however, the more seemingly powerful and dangerous it becomes. Wetiko can only be seen when we begin to realize the dreamlike nature of our universe, step out of the illusory point of view of the separate self, and recognize the deeper underlying field of which we all are expressions, of which we are all contained, and through which we are all interconnected. These are interrelated insights of the same multifaceted realization. The energetic expression of this realization and the Wetiko dissolve par excellence in comparison. Connecting with the compassion that is our nature, we find ourselves in a very, very good company. Being the unmediated expression of recognizing the dreamlike nature, compassion, hello, being the hello, being the unmediated expression of recognizing the dreamlike nature, compassion reciprocally co-arises with lucidity. In other words, if we are genuinely awakening to the dreamlike nature of real reality, both lucidity and compassion will be inseparably united components of our experience. We're going to read that again. Being the unmediated expression of recognizing the dreamlike nature, compassion reciprocally co arises with lucidity. In other words, if we are genuinely awakening to the dreamlike nature of reality, both lucidity and compassion will be inseparably united components of our experience. As if an instrument of higher intelligence, Wetiko literally invites, makes, make that demands. Oh, he's saying invites, no, demands that we become conscious of and step into our intrinsic creative power and agency or suffer the consequences. Instead of mutating so as to become resilient to our attempts to heal it, the Wetiko virus forces us to mature, to evolve relative to it. Wetiko is a quantum phenomenon in that it contains within itself the potential to either be the deadliest poison or to be the most healing medicine. Will Wetiko destroy us, or will it catalyze our evolution to wake us up? How Wetiko ultimately manifests depends upon nothing other than whether we recognize that it is revealing to us how dreamlike the very thing that is potentially killing us is at the same time, helping us to remember who we are. How Wetiko manifests depends on how we dream it. Um, Another comment. The point of view of the two authors of this book and of many people I encounter assumes that the person, maybe this is what most people do, I don't know, but it assumes that the person um, that is the reader of whatever it is that they're delivering doesn't already exist from a quote unquote top down perspective, whereas they think everybody starts as what like a worm and just moves up after they like so hopefully learn a bunch of other things. Um, I don't like that, and I don't understand that. Like I don't understand that point of view at all. And I know a lot of people live that way. Like you don't need to become enlightened. Like just Relax, bozo. Before discovering the native term Wetiko, I was calling the psychological aberration of the psyche malignant egophrenia, whose acronym is ME disease. For when all is said and done, Wetiko stems from our misidentification of who we think we are, our sense of meanness. This is a very male conversation. In a very real sense, we are not who we believe ourselves to be. If we experience ourselves as a separate self who exists from other imagined separate selves, not to mention the whole rest of the universe, from this misguided thought springs a case of mistaken identity, out of which grows the pestilence of Wetiko. I don't think I'm going to get foreshadowing just of myself to myself. I don't think I'm going to get anything out of this book. This will be great for my misogyny video, however. I think this will help with that. Subheading Goldsmithing. In writing this book, I've had to navigate the conundrum of not wanting to repeat what was said in my earlier book on the same subject, while still giving the reader a sense of the profundity of Wetiko in the case they hadn't read the book earlier. Here with this book, I want to give as much of the picture of Wetiko, in case this is the only book the reader will ever read on the subject. Each of these volumes stand on its own, not needing the other, while simultaneously complementing and supplementing each other. Due to Wetiko's multi-channeled nature, all of its myriad creative expressions are like variations on an underlying theme, with which some repetition not only hard to avoid but necessary. These reiterations feel important to the fabric of this book, as if I am circling a center point, reciting an incantation, and emphasizing certain points more than once in order to get the meaning across. I am applying that the author Alan Watts called the goldsmith technique, striking repeatedly on the same point from slightly different angles so as to help the reader take in and metabolize what I am trying to shed light on. This brings to mind how when we have recurring dreams or a recurring theme in a single dream, it is an expression that our unconscious is again and again, in slightly different forms, bringing something important to our awareness that would behoove us to consciously recognize. I like to think whatever repetition I've put, uh, I like to think whatever repetition I've purposely left in this book can be seen in the same way. Or maybe I'm just dreaming. So that's the introduction. We are on to part one. This book has parts instead of chapters. And we pause to check my phone again. Spiritual traditions, and creative artists. It should get our attention that every person who has discovered Wetiko considers it to be the most important topic to understand in our world today. In this first section, I am attempting to point out that the idea of Wetiko was nothing new, but rather has been creatively envisioned in unique ways by creative visionaries throughout the ages. When these viewpoints are seen together, they provide us with a multi-perspectival. Interesting. When these viewpoints are seen together, they provide us with a multi-perspectival vision that gives us a higher resolution than any one point of view can by itself. This can help us to begin to see this heretofore invisible mind virus in a way that is Wetiko's, instead of our worst nightmare. Don't know what that means, but we shall see. One continues, it's all in the psyche. In today's global society, Wetiko has turned on the planet itself and is threatening the survival of all human beings as well as other species and the habitability of Earth itself. Jeez Louise. Don't clip that. Though originally a Native American idea constructed by Algonquin syntax, Wetiko is a universal human disease that, due to our interconnectedness, afflicts all of us, regardless of where we come from. Wetiko's evil flourishes and is going pandemic in the petri dish of the modern industrial world. There's no way to exhale this disease anymore. We must continue to diagnose it and to treat it by facing it head on within ourselves. This is the only way to make a habitable future for us all. I think of Jung's contention that nothing really new happens in history. It is as if we are living in an endlessly recurring dream, experiencing Groundhog Day every day of our lives. Again, another type of analogy that I can't stand. You're not living in a dream. Things aren't repeating themselves. People are actively choosing to do the same thing over and over again. It's not as if it's not on purpose. Humanity seems to be continually, relentlessly, and endlessly reenacting its unhealed unconscious wounds, trauma, and abuse issues. It was Jung's opinion that we could only talk of something novel happening in the world if the previous unimaginable took place, if true reason, genuine humanity, and love won a lasting victory. It is my prayer that this work, supported by the blessings of those throughout history who have dedicated and even sacrificed their lives in order to shed a light on this deadly disease, will be in the service of the heretofore unimaginable to prevail. As Jung has pointed out, when it is a question of mass psychosis, nothing new but symbolic ideas that embrace, express, and help us recontextualize and see the emerging chaos and disorder in a new way can save us from our self-centered, self-created collective nightmare. The conventional mind is utterly useless in this capacity. It cannot help us free ourselves from this predicament because it is itself a product of and created the very madness from which we need to be liberated. As Albert Einstein famously said, we can't solve problems by using the same kind of thinking we used to when we created them. And the only genuine ideas, to quote the Spanish philosopher Jose Ortega y Gasset, are the ideas of the shipwrecked. The only genius, the only genuine ideas are the ideas of the shipwrecked. It's basically the whole quote. Here's a new idea. The Savior itself can arrive in a flash of a truly new creative idea. What Plato calls the eyes of the soul. Ideas can be an expression of and reveal the soul itself. In contrast to being abstract, immaterial, vaporous nothings that carry no weight and have no substance, ideas have real power. They are the means by which we see the world and creatively envision and give meaning to our lives. New ideas change the way we think about things and think in general, as well as what we believe. Newly emerging archetypal ideas can activate people's creative imagination. These ideas are expressions of and catalysts for a deeper, more expansive vision of the world and our place in it. A new idea can transform our very state of being and can change our conception of ourselves and our sense of what's going on in the world. Ideas are no longer afterthoughts. New ideas emerging like a lotus from the dark path of the collective unconscious itself can be conceived of as loving, can hello, can be conceived of as living psychic organisms and evolve. And can currently help us evolve. What are you talking about, bro? New ideas emerging like a lotus from the dark depths of collective unconscious itself can be conceived of as living psychic organisms that evolve and concurrently help us evolve. So books like this are why I want to go to this conference that I'm asking about the sponsorship for. So Dr. B actually does things. He's not just yapping, like he's actually telling you what something is directly. He doesn't spend 1,000 minutes giving you 1,000 analogies because he knows 1,000 analogies is not the thing that he's trying to teach you. He's trying to teach you the thing. So I'd like to go to that conference. So click the link, send the break. Thank you. These living ideas are not merely abstract things to passively think about, but involve our active engagement in integrating and unfolding what they're revealing to us, consciously participating in the formation of these living These living ideas conjures up magical effects that can potentially hold the emerging destructive forces of chaos and disorder spellbound. What can be thought of as a saving idea, novel, creative, redemptive, archetypal conceptions, can protect a people from succumbing to Jung's words, the infection of a one sided idea. It is noteworthy that Jung is describing a one sided idea as an infection where it creates an imbalance and disease in the psyche. Becoming possessed by an antiquated, fixed idea is dangerous as it can create a sclerosis of consciousness and strengthens our inner blindness. If we are unconsciously in the grip of an unreflected upon and limited idea like puppets on a string, we, without even realizing it, become the idea's instruments for representing itself into the world and other people's minds. The idea then infects not just our thinking, but everyone else who has lived, this idea then infects not just our thinking, but everyone else who has likewise installed it in their minds. These confusing ideas are unmistakably passed down through the generations. One of Wetiko's main vectors of propagation is conceptual through the realm of ideas. I don't want to keep reading this. I'll read till the next session, and then I'm stopping this recording. And we'll pick up another time. Ideas don't belong to their so-called inventor, nor are they the property of that inventor. I don't know. Intellectual property law begs to differ. And yet we are afflicted with Wetiko. We can think we have a monopoly on our ideas, believing that we own them. We may accuse others of stealing them when, in fact, they might be tuning into the same higher dimensional repositories of ideas that we are. In light of our current world crisis of creative breakthrough, a new way of looking at things, a saving idea, illuminating fundamentally new insights into the nature of our universe and our place in it is imperative. An absolute necessity for our survival. Wetiko and all that it stands for is precisely about such a new idea. Wetiko is more than just an idea, however, for it has a living reality all of its own and can transform our own experience in the world as it manifests. Our ideas about Wetiko are not separate from Wetiko in the sense that the ideas air. Oh, my book has missing words. It didn't print. In the sense that our ideas either feed the psychological aspect of the disease or help to liberate it in us as well. An idea like Wetiko, yeah, my page 24 is missing some words, man. That sucks. An idea like Wetiko, due to its empowering and liberating nature, provides us with a different angle and leverage by which to get a handle on evil. Thus, by its very nature, it is subversive, disruptive, and dangerous from the point of view of the status quo of mainstream reality, which is invested in keeping us in the dark. The danger for a living idea, however, is that if institutionalized, it can be systematic. Hello? The danger for a living idea, however, so remember, he's saying the Wetiko is a virus, it's not a living entity. The danger for a living idea, however, is that if institutionalized, it can be systematically deadened, killed even by professional teachers of a new idea. And yet, if the new emerging idea is properly tended and cultivated in the right atmosphere, it can grow, multiply, going viral in a way that can really affect change. As spiritual teacher C.I. Gurdjieff, Gurdjieff, pointed out, humanity is divisively influenced by ideas that can be shared among and speak to its members. It is extremely rare that someone is willing to abandon their ideas and viewpoints of the world. Once consciousness has claimed a certain resting point, it can be barely moved. I don't like this guy. He's a fucking idiot. It's not true. Convictions are created and people so easily get stuck in their ideas that anything different is seen as crazy or evil. It oftentimes requires a severe crisis, catastrophe, or an indeterminable neurosis to dislocate people from their entrenched perspective on things. When people become fixed in a viewpoint and hold on to their ideas of the way the world works, it is literally dangerous to reflect back to them Another way of looking at things. New ideas are usually met with strong resistance and oftentimes violence, as new ideas typically set up the equilibrium, um, upsets rather, the equilibrium of the existing world order, challenging people to their core. It should get our attention that our species presently meets all the requirements for shaking up the fixed ideas. We're in the middle of converging. Hey, what's up? Welcome to the chat. It should get our attention that our species presently meets all the requirements for shaking up our fixed ideas. We are in the middle of a converging world crisis. We are creating a worldwide catastrophe, as well as being severely neurotic. Because of the extremity of our situation, there is a real possibility that in our time, that humanity's long standing fixed ideas that no longer serve us are going to be outgrown. New ideas and ways of seeing are more reflective and in alignment with who we are will emerge to only take their place. The one thing that the greatest tyrants of all of history were and are afraid of is a new idea. This is just as true today in our increasingly interconnected digital age, as it is evidenced by increasing attempts by the powers that be to censor liberating ideas that are no longer in line with the mainstream, agreed upon narrative and its underlying agenda. As I conclude in dispelling Wetiko, nothing is more powerful than the magical idea whose time has come. Wetiko is just an idea. It is as if it had been secreted by the universe into the world and into our minds at the time in our history as the very medicine humanity needs to heal what ails our species. We might do another one, but that is a good little cliffhanger. Let's do one more. Let's do one more subheading and then we'll stop. A higher dimensional non-physical phenomenon. Some people, typically card holders in the agreed upon consensual reality, consider my work on Wetiko so out there, that they are of the opinion that it shouldn't be taken seriously. I think they see Wetiko as some sort of new age delusional gobbledygook. Viruses of the mind, psychospiritual disease of the soul to people who subscribe to mainstream culture. What I am writing about sounds paranoid and crazy if I am in a weird conspiracy theorist kind of mood. I have to confess, I find this funny as well as sad. From my point of view, the reaction is an indication that they are afflicted with the very blindness-inducing mind virus at which I am pointing. Once again, this typical reaction needs to be factored into the equation of how we deal with this perspective distorting disease of the mind. The one thing that everyone on my side of the aisle can no doubt agree on, however, is that a genuine form of madness is being acted out in our world, and that apparently crazy and far out thing, at least as in some people's eyes, that I am proposing is at the source as well as the solution of the indeterminable madness that is playing out in our world is to be found nowhere other than within the psyche. Upon close inspection, this is a no-brainer. It should not be more obvious. How could it be otherwise? Our culture is being forced to acknowledge the force and power of the psychic undercurrents that inform all manners of global events. Because of the human psyche's ability to inform and give shape to world events, Jung calls it the world power that vastly exceeds all other powers on earth. The greatest danger to humanity comes from our own psyche, which unfortunately is the part of the empirical world we know the least about. As we search for myriad external causes and solutions to the possible multiple crises we experience as we search for myriad external causes and solutions to the multiple crises we ourselves are collectively bringing about, the collective psyche is overlooked or neglected entirely as a source or causal agent of our planetary crises. These crises issue forth from one place we as a species are most disinclined to look within ourselves. The nightmare that is unfolding in the world today is the emergence of the chaotic world of the unconscious that lies hidden under the ordered and seemingly coherent world of consciousness. Jung felt that the great problem of our time is that, to put it simply, we don't understand what is actually happening in our world, which is that we are confronted with the darkness of our soul, with the darker forces of the unconscious, with evil. In writing about Wetiko and its psychic origins, I am simply trying to shed light on our little, understood, darker half that is, more than ever, insisting on being recognized. Evil has become invisible, an undeniable great power striding across the globe. If it goes unrecognized, we increasingly, if it goes unrecognized, we increasingly deliver ourselves into its hands, just as a typhus epidemic flourishes best when its source is undiscovered. That's messed up. As compared to the Christian Revolution, where a light shone from the heavens above in our time of divine revelation is emerging from below. The powers of the underworld have been unleashed. The powers of darkness are coming up, and we need to come to terms with what they are revealing or suffer the consequences. Contrary to solely being a sign of increasing moral degeneracy or decay, the revelation of darkness is a necessary and critical. Hello? The revelation of darkness is a necessary and critically important part of the next stage of humanity's collective psycho-spiritual evolution. Reason, as is evidenced all around us, has little traction in times like these. The powers of the underworld hide themselves behind our reason and highly sophisticated intellect. Our rationalism has disoriented us to the point of putting us at the mercy of the psychic underworld. It is an archetypal idea that a divine spirit was imprisoned in matter, and it was humanity's divine sanctioned role to somehow free this spirit. The Savior doesn't come down from the celestial heavens, but it arises from below, from the depths, from the unconscious. The Savior doesn't come solely from the light, but through the darkness as well. Great discoveries invariably come from the depths, just as trees never grow from the sky downward, but from the earth upward. No tree, it is said, can grow to heaven unless its roots reach below down to hell. With Wetiko, we are dealing with a higher dimensional, non-physical phenomenon that informs and gives shape to our world. This situation reminds me of what the founding fathers of quantum physics encountered when they discovered the quantum realm. They described the situation as if they had come across an unfamiliar animal, one that had never been seen before, one that they had confined for inspection within an animal house. They likened their situation to walking around this house and peering into different windows, trying to combine their fragmentary views so as to assemble a more complete view of what it is, in fact, that they were dealing with. The situation with Wetiko is similar. It is as if a higher dimensional object is casting a shadow onto the third dimension of space and time and the trans-dimensional hologram of our minds. By putting together these shadow reflections, we can begin to conceive of and construct the out of this world object that is their source. Pardon. There is no one definitive model that fully delineates the elusive workings of Wetiko disease. But when all these unique articulations are seen together, a deeper picture begins to come into focus, one that can help us to see it. We will stop there on page 29. Circumambulating Wetiko will be the next section we begin on. There is a footnote here I have to read to you. Following in Jung's footsteps, I am using the word psyche in an all-inclusive sense, connotating the totality of all psychic processes, both conscious and unconscious, not reducible to biochemical processes in the brain. It is a mysterious, substanceless substance that exists between spirit and matter. Being non-local, the psyche is not only contained within our skull, but we are surrounded by and contained within the psyche. In Jung's words, the world is psyche. This makes sense when we begin to see the dreamlike nature of the universe. Alrighty, so that's Levy, Wetiko, part 1, and a partial reading of such. We have, let's see here. 7 pages left in that section before we move on to chapter 2 or section 2. the Kabbalah's remarkable ideas. I'm enthused to see that as someone that loves Kabbalah as a practice, a functional practice. I'll be intrigued to see what he has to say in that regard. I'll read the comments, click the link, contribute to the cause, and I hope you all had a good time watching. Bye-bye.